Today, we're joined by Taylor Nielsen, founder of Athletes Game Plan and lead sports analytics and insights at Nike Golf. A former Harvard soccer player, Taylor knows what it's like to balance elite athletics and academics, and to eventually face the uncertainties of what comes after sport. The experience led her to start Athletes Game Plan, a mentorship platform helping high school and college athletes navigate their recruiting process, make more informed decisions, and feel more supported through major transitions in their athletic journey. Today, she's also works at Nike Golf in sports analytics and insights, where she helps better understand performance and support innovation in sport. Today, we're talking about identity beyond athletics, mentorship, performance, and what it looks like to build a life and career beyond the game. So, Taylor, to start us off, who are you, what do you do, and why do you do what you do in your own words?
Yeah. Well, thank you for all the nice words. Excited to chat today. I was thinking about this before we started, and I think the who are you? I obviously have always identified myself as an athlete, kind of like a hard worker, a leader. And I think just year over year it's changed so much. Now, obviously not necessarily being like a true athlete anymore and kind of just working day to day. I think leaning in more to kind of I'm a sister, I'm a friend, really enjoy just like all things outdoors, especially living here in Portland and adventuring as much as possible. In terms of what I do, I know you said a little bit of it, but I have worked at Nike for 4 years now. I've always been in the insights and analytics space, starting on the stores team as an intern before converting full time. And then I also moved on to a group called Macro and Competitive Analytics before moving here to golf, which has been super fun to be in a sport again. And then I also started Athletes Game Plan on the side. We have been live since like January at this point, so still kind of a baby company, but we're getting there. And as you mentioned, it's really just a platform to help kind of like those younger athletes get into college sports and really learn like what it means to be a college athlete. I think even since all of us played sports, like the college recruiting process and all of that has changed so quick. And when I was coaching a girls soccer team here, I was just getting loads of questions about the college athletic process. And I was like, this should just be something that, people can go to their like a school they're interested in or a program they're interested in to get those questions answered. And then I also just do private lessons for soccer on the side too.
And why do you do what you do? So,
Why do I do it? Yeah. I think for me, you know, kind of having those like three buckets in my life of obviously working at Nike and more of your kind of like typical corporate job, starting athletes game plan, and then doing coaching on the side. It's like three things that I'm really passionate about and three different ways to kind of like fill my cup in a day. Analytics and just Nike as a whole is obviously such an amazing company. Uh, and I really enjoy kind of the consumer insight side and especially applying it now to a sport like golf. Started Athletes Game Plan just because I think so many athletes can get help from us, like previous college athletes, because we have a lot of info to share, like good, bad, or ugly. I think so many things that we were like, this was the best decision I made. And I'm so glad this happened. And then there's also some things where you're like, I really wish I asked this question before I went into college and like knew these things. And so even if I can help a couple athletes, I think that would be amazing. And coaching is honestly just so fun. I coach anywhere from like 15 to 20 girls, and they are ranging from, I think my youngest is 12 all the way up to 17 right now. And honestly, it's fun just like being a mentor for them. I think it's very similar to Athletes Game Plan, just obviously in person. Being able to just kind of see them grow and help them is really fun.
I'm excited to learn more about Athletes Game Plan and the work you're doing at Nike. Maggie and I like to start at the beginning. So, what was your life like growing up, and like how would you describe yourself as a kid?
Yeah. I grew up in Seattle, well, in SeaTac, Washington. It was always like playing sports growing up. I was really big into gymnastics and obviously early on from like the age of 2. I wanted to keep going with gymnastics until I started like reaching those higher levels, and my mom was a gymnast at Wazoo. But I think it's a very hard sport, obviously. And as soon as she saw me getting higher up in level, she was like, "Okay, we're done." Like, enough. I think she had a little PTSD from that as well. So yeah, I'm glad she chose soccer though. I don't think gymnastics would have been the right sport for me. So yeah, I did gymnastics, I did dance. I tried a little stint of volleyball and basketball. Can't say I was good at basketball at all. But my parents just kept us like super active and fun as kids. I had two older sisters, so they were soccer players. One was a dancer as well. We were always outside. I mean, growing up in the Pac Northwest, you're camping constantly, you're on the boat, fishing, things like that. So, just as a whole, we were an outdoorsy family and lots of skiing and snowboarding in the winter. And yeah, I think growing up, I ended up transitioning to Crossfire, which was a bigger club out in Seattle to just kind of like further my soccer career a little bit and kind of did the full switch when I was like 13 to soccer. And honestly, it was fantastic. Like I think for me, up until college, unfortunately, like soccer was never a burden. And neither was school. Like I loved both of them so much and I had so much fun. I was talking to my mom about it the other day. Like I never looked at my high school career thinking like, oh my gosh, like I missed out on parties on the weekends or things like that because my team was just so fun. So yeah, always playing and then went to college and I think that's where some of the rough parts of my like soccer career hit, but everyone goes through it at some points.
Totally. Even like when you were saying you had to make that choice between gymnastics and soccer, did you have any kind of like mental back and forth in your brain about that? Or was it kind of just like a clear distinction and you're just like, I'm going to go full steam ahead with soccer?
I think I was definitely I, like, pushed back on my mom, but I was 8, and she was like, "No, I think" like, it was kind of, "Do you wanna do soccer or gymnastics?" And I knew I wanted to do that, and then when the dance versus soccer came, I remember it was, like, my final dance recital of the year, and then just, like, kind of just a regular soccer game, and she was like, "Which one are you going to?" And I was like, "Well, obviously soccer," and she was like, "Okay, so are we done with dance?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're done with dance."
No, but just like
So, you choose it
that
yourself. Yeah.
gravitate. Yeah.
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 So, it was always I mean, it was just I always had great coaches, great teams,
Yeah.
so yeah, it just felt very natural.
Yeah. And Crossfire is like one of the top academies for youth soccer in the country.
Yes.
Is there like when you look back at your time there, how do you think that environment shaped you not just as a player, as a soccer player, but also as like a person?
Yeah, I moved over to Crossfire when I was 12. So, I grew up playing for a club called HPFC, which I don't even think exists anymore, it was super small. I actually played up, like, 4 years 'cause the teams just weren't that big. So, I was, like, playing with 10-year-olds when I was 6, and when I made the move to Crossfire, it was, like, such a bigger environment. I think the first year I came in, we had, like, A through E teams, like, there was so many girls playing, and then ECNL started when we were 12, and I think, whether or not it was just, like, Crossfire or my team, I think my team whole was so close and so good, but I mean, individually, like, we had some really phenomenal players, obviously, like, Sophie Hurst went on to go play pro, Katie Duong is, in the USL, like, we had people go to some bigger places, but as a whole, like, all of us went to pretty, like I don't wanna say that was all D1, but it wasn't, like, these massive schools, like, no one was going to, the FSUs and UNCs, but we made it to the Final Four every year, and I think just kind of that, work ethic with the team was really great. We definitely had some ups and downs with coaches. I think as a whole, though, I it gave me at least, like, very good work ethic. I was a I was, like, always captain of my teams, up until college, and so I think our coach, because he took, like, a little bit of a backseat in terms of, like, the day-to-day stuff, I was always in charge, like being a leader, getting like our food orders together and things like that, which was great. And I just learned a lot of like leadership and personal skills during that. And then obviously just the soccer side kind of clicked as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say it makes sense that you're in a mentorship type of role now if you were the mother of the team then too. So we'd love to spend a little bit more time talking about Harvard because while the early experiences lay the foundation for kind of who you are, which is often where a lot of transformation happens. So you can touch on kind of your soccer experience specifically, but also you feel like one lesson from Harvard soccer that you feel like has taught you something in life that might have nothing to do with soccer at all?
Uh, my so going into Harvard soccer, I was like, this is cloud nine. This is great. Super excited for like kind of the team and just the environment. Obviously, moving from Seattle to Boston, I was just excited for. It was like a new area because I had a lot of friends who were kind of staying in the Pac Northwest. And first 2 years were great, like phenomenal, no problems. Played a ton, which was awesome, obviously, as a freshman coming in. And I think clicked super well with the team. COVID happened, which you guys both know. And we got kicked off our junior year. So obviously we weren't able to play that whole year. And so coming back senior year, I learned a lot about myself, about like soccer and just kind of the role it plays in your life. And it was pretty brutal. Not a lot of playing time, a lot of like butting heads with coaches and just I think I'm sure so many teams can say this, but it was like two basically new obviously two new classes and then two old classes. And so normally when you're trying to like teach and adjust to like 7 or 8 people coming in, it was now like 15 because it was just a whole new group. Um, and I think it was just a very interesting dynamic. I probably did not handle my senior year the best in terms of just how I showed up like as a teammate and player. But I would say probably the biggest thing that I took away from that is just like figuring out who you are beyond the field. Having obviously a harder time in your career, especially when you know that it's gonna be your last year. Like I had I think when I was younger, everyone's like, "Oh, I wanna go play like on the national team." And then you get older and you're like, "Yeah, that's probably not gonna happen." For me, it was never like playing pro. Like I knew college was probably the end of it. And so when it like your worst year is your senior year, and then it feels like you put so much of your identity and kind of self-worth into soccer, it obviously makes it so much harder. And so I wish I would have poured into outside relationships a little bit more with, friends, not only at school, but back home, and feeling like I actually left school with something that I was like happy about. And I think after school ended, it was like pretty tough. Well, like I wanted to leave. Like I was so ready to be done, which I don't want anyone to ever feel that way when they're leaving college. So, yeah, I think trying to like separate soccer and personal life as much as possible.
But that's hard when it's what brought you there in a way. A lot of people go to Harvard or go to schools because of the sport, and then it's top of mind, and you think that's everything. And it's great that you've learned that now. Like we're still young, and you already have that
Wow.
perspective. Was there a specific moment that you feel like you realized, like not just the whole senior year? Was there a specific moment where you sat yourself down, whether it was a conversation or a practice, where you kind of realized that soccer was no longer going to be your whole identity?
I don't know if I like realized it in the moment. I think it was more kind of looking back and like once I left school and like started working at Nike, obviously Nike has so many ex-athletes and now I get to like play soccer every morning. Well, not every morning, but like a couple mornings a week with like a bunch of really great players, which is so fun.
From like they work at Nike too?
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a group of I mean, probably there's like 50 people at Nike who played like college or pro, but there's like a group of 20 of us in the mornings, which is awesome. But I left college and I'm almost through my cleats away. Thank God I didn't, because I get rid of a good pair of cleats.
Right.
But I was like, "I'm done with soccer, that's it." I just, was so ready to, be out of it. And I think when I kind of, got back in Nike and then just started talking to people and playing soccer just because I, loved it, not because it was a job anymore and it was something that you were, supposed to do at school. I think that's when I realized, soccer should be something that, actually brings me joy and that I want to be doing versus something that I'm, putting so much time and pressure on. And I think that's when I was like, I wish in college I would have separated those 2 things and, just tried to have fun with it because I was definitely, pretty angry senior year. And then it just practices everything, and the I think the team itself was also, angry and not the best culture, which is, not how you should play a sport at all. And that's not why kids should get into sports, so
Yeah. So if you could sit next to your freshman year self on the flight to Harvard, what would you tell her in that moment?
I would probably tell her, hmm, I think I would tell her, there is going to be, ups and downs in school more than truthfully, in soccer, in, academics, and honestly, socially. I hadn't really hit a lot of bumps in high school. My friends and I always joke, stuff either hits the fan in high school or it hits the fan in college. And then if it doesn't hit the fan either one of those places, then, it's gonna hit you later in life. And
Super
there's
real.
always a time where, something something happens, whether it's with friends or, relationships or family or your sport, especially your sport, there's always gonna be a time where, something dips. And if I just told my freshman year self that there's gonna be a dip and you have to, like, figure out how to get through it while also being a good teammate and friend, I think that would have been something that I wish I might not have acted differently or, changed what I did my senior year, but I wish just given some more perspective on that because it seemed like everything was gonna be flying colors through school.
Yeah. I think being able to say that, but also not letting yourself lose excitement for what's ahead too, like that should deter anybody from any challenge or any situation that's coming their way, but just knowing that with it. But another thing too, like you talked a lot about soccer, but you also invested a lot outside of soccer, whether you said it in that response just now, but you were a part of the Harvard Women in Business, Women of Harvard Athletics, and the president of Charge. Was that intentional or kind of what inspired you to get involved in stuff like that outside of soccer?
Yeah. I think Harvard Women in Business, honestly, it was something that so many athletes did. And there was just a lot of really cool speakers that came to Harvard. And I think after my freshman year, I don't know if I had a conversation with a teammate about it. Uh, I I got an internship after my freshman year, and the guy who started the company actually, it was called Trace. He also was a Harvard alum, but didn't play sports at all. But he kind of reminded me, he was like, "There is so much at Harvard, like, so many opportunities and connections," and, I only got that internship job because of a connection at Harvard, I went in not thinking that I needed a job that summer, and I maybe didn't, but, you can get so many things out of a school like that, and just going and getting in because of soccer and then not actually kind of, using the school for what it's there for and all of those amazing connections that you can get would be silly and kind of a miss. So I joined that. And then for Charge, that actually started in COVID. I had some of my old high school friends at my house. And one of my friends at University of Oregon was starting the one at Oregon. And she was like, "You should start one at Harvard." And so I think for me, Charge, which the whole idea behind it was, helping women find their fit in, the fitness space. I think obviously it's evolved a ton, but they always had this stat that, I think it was, 90% of women go to the gym and just, go on the elliptical or something because it's, used to be a pretty foreign place, and I still think it is for some women. I think just the idea of like, okay, soccer is not, it's not working right now. Like, what's something else that can fill my cup and like get me connected to other people at Nike in a space that I'm actually passionate about, which is like health and wellness. And so starting that was so fun. Like, we got to go to so many different studios in Boston and so many women. We had a few athletes, but so many women like weren't on any athletic teams. And I remember we did like this Olympic weightlifting class, which honestly I was like, I do not think anyone's gonna like this. Because we walked in and the guy was huge and like an Olympic weightlifter. And I was like, okay,
Whoa.
this will be. And this one girl was like, I loved that class. Like, he taught us how to do snatches and she was obsessed and she like started weightlifting after that. And so, I mean, things like that, you're like, that's great. That's awesome to just like help people. Cause I think people who are in sports like just already have so many ins in that way and they feel more comfortable in those spaces. And then people who don't, like, it is a daunting space. So being able to help women was awesome.
I remember seeing that all the time and wishing I could, but I always had practice, but I thought that was a
I
great
know.
you talked about playing a sport for fun and losing the joy. Can you talk about whether Harvard contributed to that or your environment, and if you ever felt the pressure to have it all together?
Yeah, I think I just for my business, we just did a panel. There was a player from Ohio State and then another gal from Oregon State. And we were talking about just like the differences in our three schools and kind of experiences. The girl from Ohio State, she was like, our programs were amazing. And like, if you had a test and you were like missing them, you could just miss it and then like do a project to make it up. And she was like, I'm guessing that wasn't the same for you. And I was like, not in the slightest. Like, if you missed the test, you were screwed. And I think like academics for me always came very easily. Statistics in college did not. But I think at Harvard, I was saying I didn't feel the pressure, and I don't know, Maggie, if you agree, because everyone was doing it. Like, everyone was staying into the library until, like, 12:31, and so it didn't feel like this, like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much school, there's so much soccer going on," because everyone was kind of in the same boat. Like, I think if I was the only person staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning doing my homework who was an athlete, it would feel like a lot, but everyone there was so awesome, and I got so much help from different people, especially, like, some of the athletes, so I don't think Harvard contributed to that, which is why I coach now, and I, like, feel pretty strongly about it. I think for better or for worse, like, my I think my coaches impacted it a ton, and I won't, like, dig into that, but I think obviously, like, coaches can make or break how good or bad an experience is.
I mean, experience just shapes you so much, whether it's the school you're at or the coaches you are or the coaches that you're dealing with. I thought the point that you made about pressure was interesting because it is true. It's like everyone around you is doing the same thing, so you don't really think anything of it. If anything, at least for myself, like I felt that change or the difference after I left that environment. So like that pressure that I was holding myself to, I didn't even notice until you take yourself out of an environment. So I just think the idea of like being in little bubbles, whether it's like growing up in a small town bubble, then going to school in a bubble, and then if you're constantly moving through bubbles in life, it's kind of like you got to do some self-reflection of what matters to you. That's what you found, and then push yourself in whatever way that you like.
And I think also that from a point that you said there was like how you probably wouldn't have started athlete's game plan if it wasn't for your experience during that year. And I think like you said, like kind of if shit's gonna hit the fan, whether it's in high school, college, or after college, like life is gonna happen. There's gonna be things that don't go as planned, and it's gonna affect you mentally, and it's gonna feel like a detour in your life. And I think that's very relatable to a lot of people. But I think that the aspect that you took that experience and gained the wisdom, gained the experience, and then turned it into something that you could do good for other people is unique and it's admirable. And I think that like a lot of people should do that because I think those hard times are such pivotal times in people's life to grow and be a better version of themselves, even though it feels like it's like they're at their lowest point during that time. It actually can be very beneficial. So can you tell us like a little bit about, like, you're the founder of Athletes Game Plan. Can you tell us about kind of what it is, what inspired you to start it, and just kind of take us through it, and for somebody who isn't familiar with it?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned, I started like really getting into Athletes Game Plan like probably a year ago. We launched just this July though, or sorry, January. And Athletes Game Plan is a way for younger athletes to get connected to college athletes to like learn as much as they possibly can. When I first started working at Nike, I actually got like a decent amount of questions from coworkers about, if their kids were a little bit older, if they should play college sports, like, did I like it? I had a coworker who's like, her kid just turned 2 and she's like, "What sports should I put him in?" I was like, "I don't know."
Same, actually.
Yeah. I am a big proponent of gymnastics or dance though. Like I always tell parents that because you learn such good body like coordination that I actually do think parents should start their kids there at least. But yeah, so I had parents asking me there, and then when I was coaching, I think a lot of my girls, like, there's so many things that we can teach them that I don't know if they know to ask. Like, we had a soccer tournament in San Francisco, and we went to University of San Francisco and Stanford, and one of the girls was walking around Stanford campus, and it's obviously very enticing. It's like one of the prettiest campuses in the world. And she was like, "I wanna go here." And she turned to me and she's like, "Can I go here?" And I was like, "How are your grades? Like, let's just start there." Like, yeah, I was like, "I also would have loved to go here, like, incredible campus." And I think it's it's so fun to, like, be able to help kids in those conversations. Uh, and I know my mom played in college, but, like, wildly different recruiting experience, and then my dad didn't go to college. And I'm sure by the time I have kids and they're going to college, I won't know what the college process is anymore. I barely know it now. And so I think just for like college athletes, one to like have a little bit of that fulfillment and like talk about their experience is so helpful to younger athletes. And then helping parents too, who maybe have a college kid who's going and they know like 90% of it, but the rest of it is hard and it's challenging. And also I think some kids don't know like where they stack up, which is super important as well. Like I knew just from where I was, like I wasn't going to a massive school, but I had like a decent chance at some other schools. And so just even getting that perspective I think is great and hearing about other other schools. Like Harvard wasn't on my roadmap like at all. I think just partially being from the West Coast, it's like Ivy Leagues, it was like, those are in movies. That's not where you go. And then they reached out and I was like, "Oh, wow, like this is probably a good idea." So yeah, and I think high schools, depending on the high school, a lot of them aren't necessarily super equipped to help college or like future college athletes. They're equipped to help you to get into college. My high school and like no shade to them. I remember I went to our like college counselor who you had to have meetings with and she was like, "Okay, like where are you going, hun?" And I was like, "I'm going to Harvard." And I was a sophomore cuz I had like committed my sophomore year uh, unofficially and I was like, "I'm going to Harvard." And she like kind of laughed at me and she's like, "No, you're not." And I was like, "No, I am." And she was kind of like, "No, like, you're" my grades were I mean, I ended with a, like, 3.95, but she was like, "You're not getting in respectfully." And I was like, "Okay." And I just kinda, like, ended the conversation. I was like, "I'm just gonna go because
Yeah,
I know I'm getting in."
yeah.
And unfortunately, like, she just didn't know that that's how it works. Like, you can get into these really good schools even if you aren't, like, a 4.2 student who does a ton of, like, volunteering on the side. So, yeah, I think I had so many different things, and then I think just going to Harvard and having, like, so many highs and then really low lows, I just look back and wish that I could have learned a little bit more of that. Like, I think it all probably would have still happened, but maybe I would have been a little bit better prepared. So, all that to say, I launched in January and have almost 200 athletes on my website. They're at 85 different schools across 20 different sports. I got my first equestrian girl yesterday, which I was very excited about. And yeah, I think it's been going great. It's definitely like it was a little bit longer of a journey than I anticipated, and even then, like still getting high school athletes on board is tough, but that's okay. Like it's a startup and that's fine. And overall, like been a great feedback so far. I've loved meeting all of my college athletes. I've talked to all of them personally. So many crazy stories and unique journeys, and just even in a sport like soccer, I think I have maybe like 20 different soccer players. Everyone has a different path, which I also think is really important for younger athletes to hear. Like they think if I didn't start playing soccer at 2 years old, I'm never going to go play. And I have a girl who she's lacrosse at Duke and she didn't start playing lacrosse until she was a freshman, which is insane. She grew up playing basketball, so she obviously is like a phenomenal athlete. But I'm like, it's not too late, like for someone, and also maybe even just helping kids one see like, can I go to a better school, or just go to college and don't play sports anymore? Because it also, I think my sister, she at times was like, sometimes I wish I just like didn't play soccer in college, and I just went to a bigger college and just had the college experience. So whatever way I think kids get help through my app, I think will all be beneficial no matter where they end up.
You and I have talked about the power of mentorship and like just like how important it is. And I think we live in a society that standards like you go to high school, you then go to college, you get a career. And it sounds like it's so standard. But the reality is that like you don't know the like vast diversity of experiences that people have. And it's just so powerful to hear people in their own words, like really in the true colors of like what that experience can look like. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's your experience, but here's the different hurdles that I faced, and here are the different lessons I've learned and the people I met. It really puts color to it and allows just somebody going through that experience feel less shocked when there's things that come up that it doesn't go the way that they thought it did. And so I think it's such a powerful model that
Especially in sports too, because I feel like the social media, all you see is the highlight reels of the what school people are
Yeah,
going to, but you don't
it's
see
crazy.
ups and downs that you talked about, Taylor, and then everything you just explained, Kayla, all the color that leads up to it.
Yeah, for sure. It's also I've had so many conversations with athletes who have had a very similar experience to me with coaches and stuff. And it's kind of shocking. I'm like, "Oh," like we a lot of people have had some ups and downs with coaches, which honestly like made not didn't make me feel better, but it was like there is a shared experience to college sports as well, which I don't think is talked about enough because you do hear, I think more so online, of so many people being like, my college athletic experience was the best. I never had any issues. Like it was phenomenal. And then you start talking to all these athletes. And yes, for the most part, I think everyone's like so grateful for their experience. But a lot of people like went through really rough times in college. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of college sports.
I think it's also beneficial for the mentor who's kind of sharing their experience, and it like gives them ability to process it since you started. I know you haven't been doing it for a long time, but is there like a certain conversation or story that you've had throughout doing it so far that reminded you of like why, like how much this work really does matter for people?
I think I had a conversation with a dad, and it wasn't like he had had a conversation with my business and then also just with me coaching his daughter, which I hope like I mean, we haven't had a ton of high school athletes yet, but I think even the experience that I've had with her, I've been coaching her for probably about a year now. He just, like, got on the phone with me and he's like, "I just wanted to start by saying, like, has had a really tough year in soccer," and he's like, "I just have not seen her smile that much on the field when she was out there with you today, and she's, like, so excited to train this summer and so excited to just, like, try and get back into it, and she has a good head on her shoulders of, like, where she might land in the high school season, but I think just your, like, encouragement and just, like, being there as, like, a ear to listen to has been so helpful for her." And I was like, "Stop, that was so nice." But it is true, like, I know I had people that I talked to when I was growing up and even people now, like, in the workforce. My, like, first internship boss, I love her, she's amazing, and she's someone I can always go to just talk to, and I hope younger athletes, like, find that on my platform. I hope they meet an athlete that they feel like they can stay in contact with. My boyfriend coaches kickers. He kicked at Maryland, and he's been talking to some guys for, like, 10 years at this point, just because 'cause he's been doing it so long, and it was so sweet the other day, one of his guys called him, and he just talked about his girlfriend the whole time, and he's like, "Danny, I'm having a really hard time," and he's not even anymore, like, he's out of college and he's working now,
Yeah.
but I think it's so just community and connection, like, is so important now because, like you said, so many people see all this stuff on Instagram about how people's lives are going, and it's like the reality of that is so far from the truth. So, just having a space where hopefully some younger athletes can get connected, and feel like they have someone that they could reach out to if they need it is so important. Because I think too, if maybe I was in college and had a mentor that I really felt like I could just call instead of like and my mom was fantastic, I called her all the time. But someone who had kind of gone through a similar experience, to just kind of talk me through it, I think would have been crazy beneficial. And so, yeah, all that to say, I think I've had little hints of it here and there, and I'm hoping to hear more of those later.
And if there is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's kind of going through that college process, and what would it be when they're choosing a college to go to?
Yeah, I think well, I mine regular piece of advice that I would always give is, like, if you get injured, is that still gonna be a place where you want to be? And I think it's easier to say injured than, like, if you, like, stop playing and you're, like, not having a good time with coaches, teammates, whatever, because athletes can digest that a little bit easier. But I think it's so true. You hear of a lot who go to these colleges, like, for their sport, and then something happens, obviously, like, roster cuts happened a couple years ago and people, like, aren't on their team anymore, and then they don't like the college, which is such a bummer. I also had an athlete that I talked to yesterday, which I was like, "That was fantastic." She was like, "The school you go to, like, you should want to be surrounded by the people who are there." Which I thought was, like, so I mean, it's so true for the rest of, like, your entire life, like, you should surround yourself with people who make you better and keep you accountable and make you, like, wanna work harder, and I think the same goes for a school. Like, if you're going to a program and going to a school where after your 4 years, you know you'll walk out a better person and a better, like, teammate and friend and leader, I think that's the school that you should aim for versus going somewhere where you don't feel like you're gonna grow at all. Because college sports should challenge you and push you to your limits a little bit. But there's a reason, especially for women, why, like, so many end up as very, like, high up leaders later on in life because that's what sports does, for better or for worse.
I think yeah, I agree. I think something specific about Harvard too. I thought about this when I was there, that everybody when they get the offer to Harvard just says yes right away because it is
Yeah,
Harvard. It's a name, and
yeah.
it's not just Harvard, it's a lot of colleges. But a lot of people actually end up being unhappy there because they didn't do any other research of, do I like a city school? Do I like a this school? So I think that's also helpful. That's at least advice that I would give to somebody as they start getting offers come in if they do have options.
I completely agree, especially with NIL now too. I think it's gonna be so hard for athletes of, like, "I'm getting $1,000,000 at this place. I'm gonna
I
go." It's like, that might not be the right choice.
like, even me now, if I got offered $1,000,000, I might
You're like,
yeah, thank you. As long as somebody teaches me how to manage the money.
yeah.
The other thing too, Kayla talked about the continuation of the relationship of the mentorship program, which I think is so valuable. Even for myself now in my career, I think it's great to see so many different paths because it just keeps you inspired. I mean, Liz already said it, but I give you a lot of kudos for everything that you're building, and I think we're gonna help you share it across teams. I think it will take you to grow, and it's a great idea for athletes, current athletes, and then aspiring young athletes. And
Yeah.
then another thing we wanted to talk about too we found that one thing that's interesting about your career is that your work has stayed connected to sport, which is very lucky. So we've talked about your experience as an athlete and as a founder, but we'd love to hear about your professional career. And Kayla mentioned today you work in sports analytics and insights at Nike Golf. But for people who aren't familiar with that world, what does that role actually look like?
Yeah. So the way that analytics is structured at Nike, there's a few different groups. My group specifically, there's, I don't know, like 7 different teams, and we're all aligned to a sport. Um, so there's a running team, a basketball team, sportswear training, and then my team is called Emerging Growth and Brands. And that essentially means like some of the smaller sports and or ACG, which is our like outdoor line, or Nike Skims. And then we have golf and tennis. And so I moved into this golf role in March, and it can kind of be the like analytics and consumer insights work can be really like a massive range, whether it's just helping the team understanding like where we're stacking up with the competition. FootJoy is obviously our biggest competitor right now. So it's like, what are they putting out versus what we're putting out? How is that affecting our market share? The big body of work that I'm actually doing right now is in like women in golf. That has something that's like an area that traditionally we've underserved a little bit, and we're kind of getting back into it. We just reset our women's line. All the product is looking really good, but it's figuring out like how do we show up for female golfers in a different way than we show up for male golfers. Truthfully, I knew what I grew up playing a little bit. My dad like tossed us in lessons as kids, which honestly I'm so thankful for now. So I think what I've come to realize, like with between men's and women's golf, is there is obviously so many similarities in terms of like how women show up to the course and why they got into golf and things like that. But the biggest difference is just how she feels like while she's playing. I went and played this last weekend, and I showed up and I was the only female like within miles of sight, and it's just a very different experience. And so trying to help the team just kind of like figure out what we need to do differently than we do on kind of the men's golf side before we relaunch our new women's gear. So it's been super fun. The team is amazing. Like I said, just being back in like a very sport focused role is a dream, especially at a place like Nike, which is obviously so massive. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
And close to home. And can you speak about more like the day to day of your role? I don't know if you had you joked about not doing well in stats at Harvard, which I know it's a hard course, but do you spend most of your days in analytics and data? And is that your strong suit?
Yeah, so I did applied math and data science at Harvard, and I always knew I wanted to be in like the STEM world. I always liked math when I was younger, and coming to Nike, I started in like a pretty data science heavy role, and after like a year I was like, nope, this is not for me. Like I can code and I'm good at it, and like pattern matching I really enjoy. But just sitting in front of my computer all day and like not I didn't feel super connected to like Nike and sport. I mean, I was like, this just doesn't like get me excited in the mornings. So my second role was significantly less data heavy and was more on storytelling and like the consumer insights side. So we were trying to build stories to help people understand. We talked a lot about like Adidas and New Balance and like what they're doing and how their strategies have been like paying off for them. And so now it's like kind of taking that second role and then just focusing it on golf. And I think doing it's hard because it, like, changes all the time, but doing more kind of, like, future research, so, like, more of a strategy hat, I would say, to figure out areas of opportunity. And the thing I like about my role is traditionally, Nike hasn't always used a lot of data and analytics, and so being able to come to the table and not just say, like, "Women golfers are important," actually saying, like, 20 now it's 29% of on-course golfers are women, and women's golf has grown like 46% in the last 5 years. Like being able to like put statistics down behind it and data to be like, obviously, like, women's golf is important, but it is a business at the end of the day, and so, like, you have to prove your business case, and for me, I think that's really fun. So, like, blending data, but then we also did a trip down to, New York and LA and talked to a lot of female golf consumers to get, like, the kind of, like, human side of it, was awesome. So, like, now it's kind of the best of the both worlds, and obviously, like, soccer would be an ideal place to be, uh, but being in a sport like golf, which is, like, small at Nike, is honestly fun because it's a little bit more startup-y. I'm the only person on golf versus, soccer, they have, like, 5 people doing data and analytics. So, kinda get to, like, steer the ship a little bit, which is super fun.
Yeah, it's an emerging sport. I think that's really cool. And I am actually learning that in business right now. I feel like because I feel like I'm someone who's super passionate about ideas and visions, and then the manager, people will be like, "Well, where are the numbers to back that up? Like, are we making money?" You have to bring yourself back to the reality. Like, "Oh, maybe the idea wasn't as good as I thought." But another question I was curious about are what are some parts of performance that you feel like data will never capture?
I don't know if it's, like, performance, but I think just the, like, sentiment and feeling of being a female golfer. Like I said, and I did my big presentation on Thursday, it went super well, but explaining some of those things to a lot of the men in the room of, like, this is like, and I don't know if I should say this on recording, but, like, imagine,
Go
like,
for
men
it.
men walking into a Victoria's Secret. That's how I imagine sometimes it's like women's golfers, not the same, but, like, it is not a foreign place, but you're like, "Oh, there's a lot of men, and maybe I'm not super good at golf." Like, for me, I'm an athlete, but I'm not, like, the best at golf, and it's just, like, a hard feeling, and then worrying about if your skirt is too short and having, like, some comments being made by sometimes older men, you're just like, "I don't feel super welcome here." And not to say that's not always true, but kind of explain, like, for women who have played sports are, like, just confident in and of themselves, it would be a little bit easier, but someone who's, like, fresh to the sport world, has never played golf before, like, trying to walk into that environment and know what clubs to pick up, like, know where to park your golf cart. You're supposed to know that, you don't talk when someone's doing a backswing, like, there's a lot of weird rules to go.
I just learned that recently.
You're
Yeah.
literally describing how I feel like going to the golf
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so hard, and so I think it's, like, trying to when you are and our consumer insights groups, like, just talk about this all the time of, like, really putting yourself in someone else's shoes and, like, trying to paint those pictures for people, I think is so important. Because you can put so many numbers behind things, but that's also why we go talk to consumers, because we had women be like, "Their pockets in these skirts aren't great," or like, "I don't wanna lift up my skirt to then put stuff in my pockets because I don't wanna, like, show my skirt." Just things like that, and having to explain like, "Hey, our bodies change throughout the month, like, this skirt one day is gonna feel great, and the next day, it's gonna feel horrible." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
even literally, I was like, "This happened to me literally yesterday." Like, that's just the reality of things, but honestly, to me, like, it's so fun. Like, it's almost feels like trying to get them to I don't know, like, it's like being a lawyer of, like, really convincing them of your case and, like, why this is important, and when it's in a sport and, like, a context that I enjoy, I definitely get into it.
Yeah. I also think about the whole concept of the data-driven piece with college athletes too. I know, like, the Harvard basketball team is now all wearing whoops. I don't know about the Harvard soccer team,
Well, nice.
but I just think that part is interesting too because they can measure and change practices and all that stuff, but there's no real replacement for feeling, I think. I don't actually wear a whoop, and I don't need the sleep thing. You're
Yeah.
so scary, Kayla. So Kayla's trying to convince me too.
I
Yeah.
love it.
I do love it. I just, like, convinced my mom too. I'm like, it's great."
Yeah,
It is,
maybe
but
I'll
I think I agree with you, Maggie. There is, like, an element too that it's, like, it gets to a point where, like, the data is so important, but then there is an element that it's, like, you have to trust how you feel as an individual too, and
And we kind of touched on this, but when you think about your legacy, what impact do you hope to have on people, the people that you serve?
I think I think for me, just like whether people use my business or they interact with me or like I coach them, I want them to look back and like know that that experience helped them in one way or another and like changed maybe the course or like a decision that they made for the better. I know personally that I've had so many like impactful and amazing people in my life that and it you can do so many things, but I think just like people at the end of the day are what you're going to remember and it's not, what they look like or what they were wearing or whatever, it's how they made you feel. And so I want people to leave athletes game plan especially knowing that they felt like they got something out of it. And maybe it's like not in that moment. It might be 5 years later that you're like, "Wow, I am so glad that that happened." I think that's happened so many times in my life. Like I said, with even just all the coaching stuff, I wouldn't be where I was today, and I wouldn't nearly have had some of the success at work or just the, experience with coaching an athlete's game plan had I not gone through that. And so helping people just to also understand that like everything truly does happen for a reason and hopefully just helping shape that along the way is important.
Amazing answer.
Mhm.
And our last question, Kayla, do you want to take it away? Do the honors?
Yeah, our last question for you is who do you nominate to share their journey?
Her name, I'm gonna butcher her last name, so I'll send it to you, but I wanna say Wanda Rosowski. She started the Athlete Lab. Her and I are actually partnered. She worked at Nike for, like, 10 years and was on the Canadian national team, played at I wanna say, soccer, and she's amazing. She's so cool. She lives in Sun Valley now. I met her my mom lives in Sun Valley, and so I met her while I was there through, like, a friend of a friend, and she is so cool, has so much great advice. I believe did marketing at Nike for a really long time and now is doing, like, strength and conditioning and then, like, mental performance for athletes also trying to get into college. So her and I have partnered to kind of hopefully hit both sides of it, of not only the, like, physical side, but then more of, like, the mental side, on my end. So she's amazing.
Sweet.
Awesome. We're
Yeah.
excited. That's awesome. It's a
Yes.
great one.